thank you everyone for coming to this webinar about project risk management and how to catch issues before they catch you. So I'm here with Mike and Lewis. I know you've seen Lewis a few times if you've been in our webinars before, but I'll tell you a little bit about them. So Lewis actually is our new VP of Operations at Moovila. So congrats to Lewis. He just did such a great job at onboarding people that we just needed more of him. And then we have Mike visiting us here today. He's the big boss at Moovila. He's our CEO, and he's also
You saying I have a weight problem?
No, not that kind of big boss.
I'm kidding.
Everyone's boss here. So, and he sure as heck knows a lot about project risk management, considering he came up with the RPAX. So I'm going to let them talk a little bit about that. But I'll tell you, my name's Colleen. Nothing too crazy. I'm a growth marketing specialist here, and you'll probably see me on the webinars here and there, just kind of emceeing. I'll let Mike and Lewis take it away, and see you guys later.
Cool. Thanks, Colleen, and don't downplay yourself there. You do a lot more than all of us, so we appreciate you very much. So, Mike, do you want to start with the sun, or do you want to start with the RPAX and the history of? Okay, all right.
I can talk about the history of RPAX if you want that. And do you want to give a little context of RPAX for people on the call?
Yeah, I think what would be really helpful is to talk a little bit about, the history even around Moovila, right, and how it came about, and then how the RPAX was shaped as part of that.
Yeah. So in a past lifetime, my CTO and myself built a business intelligence and analytics company, and we sold that to Equifax back in 2011, 12. Inside that business, grew it, scaled it, but during that time we were sort of fascinated why projects would struggle and why there continued to be an issue. Really mature segment in space, and was just kind of confused why this was still a struggle. People didn't struggle with spreadsheets, word processors, accounting software. And there were a couple of really fascinating things that we learned when we started the research, like why people struggled with projects. And one of those things was a probability issue that we learned. And just to sort of put a point on what we mean by probability, I'll tell everybody on the call today, if you have projects or portfolios of any time, you deal with the same probability issues that you have with endpoints failing, right? You don't go, oh, we're going to go months and months without an endpoint issue. Like, it's almost a statistical certainty. If you've got thousands of endpoints, even with a low failure rate, you're going to have issues. Well, it's the same thing with projects. And to kind of put a point on that, we learned that if you have a project with 40 tasks in the critical path, that dependent chain of tasks, and everybody gets their work done on time, 90% of the time. So 9 out of 10 times they deliver their work on time. The probability that they're going to get that project done on time is only 1.5% without having to crash it. By crash it, I mean it's that scramble of, oh, we got to shorten this downstream task, we got to work evenings and weekends, or we're going to be late, right? And if you have a portfolio, and no one's working just one project, if you have a portfolio of 20 projects like that, the probability is about 3 times 10 to the negative 37 that you're actually going to get all those done without a problem. And once again, coming back to that first fact that I said, hey, the sun won't rise, it's 6 times 10 to the negative 13th. It's basically like a trillionth of a percent that the sun won't rise. Well, this is a billion, almost billion times less likely to happen, that you're going to get all your work done. It's just not going to happen on time. Like, you're just going to have problems. And so that was fascinating to us. And we said, okay, we can't fix that probability problem for people, but what can we do? And it was, we should develop AI, autonomous, discrete systems to monitor projects to give early warning detection. And I guess the best metaphor that a lot of our customers have talked about in the MSP and MSSP space was, hey, that's sort of like an RMM for projects, right? Tasks are like endpoints, they have failure rates. RMMs allow us to identify those risks early, increase our span of control. And so, that was really what we set out to do, was to build a technology that would autonomously monitor those projects and identify risks and issues and remediate those and update timelines. Once again, kind of doing for projects what RMMs do for endpoints. So we were excited to roll out. The tech took a long time to develop, right? So, and we can talk more about that later, about sort of our flavor of AI and the deterministic process and why that's important, and the new AI today and what it can do well and what its limitations are. But spent a lot of time building out that infrastructure. I will say this, Lewis, as we did it, Jensen Huang on NVIDIA is sort of famous for saying, oh, I wouldn't do it again, just because you realize just how involved was it.
Yeah.
Like building out a robust project and portfolio management platform, there's just so much more in it than anyone I think could imagine, because like, oh, it's just projects and tasks, right? And it sort of seems that way on the surface, but it turned out to be a non-trivial issue. So we got really fortunate. We got into a big partnership with Komatsu, the heavy equipment manufacturer. They do autonomous bulldozers and excavators, and they wanted to have autonomous construction management. So we partnered with them about 5 years ago. And that partnership has been great for us because it really allowed us to heavily develop the technology, automate that, and make it work well for the SMB space. And that's when we saw the opportunity. Some MSPs came to us and they saw the tech and went, wow, this looks great. And there are actually a lot of similarities between MSPs and heavy civil and construction companies as far as the size of the business, the challenges they have, the finance, the margins, the changes, the customer issues. All of those dynamics are very similar. So there was really sort of a really good fit for us to kind of get into the MSP space. And we made the decision to do the integrations with the large PSAs, ConnectWise, Halo, Autotask, and make those bidirectional, because that was sort of a table stake for the players in that space. So, but we've been really excited to be in this industry and space. We've seen a lot of growth, and a lot of our customers have enjoyed the value of getting that sort of, call it RMM for projects, right? Sort of solving a lot of the same problems, span of control, risk management. I think that I'll say this, sort of one of the big surprises for us in this, at least coming from customers, was improved customer relationship, right? I think a lot of leaders, CEOs, and ops were tired of getting the angry calls from customers because they were caught off guard that they were late delivering or they had a problem, and they weren't able to communicate that to the customer because they just didn't have the data. They weren't warned early enough. So always better to call a customer early and let them know we're going to have a problem in 2 months, as opposed to, hey, I'm learning today that the thing we're supposed to deliver today is now going to be a month late. That tends to upset more. So, but yeah, that's sort of a quick trip down memory lane on back in the
no, and it's good too. And we've got some existing customers on here and some prospects as well. And I always find that for existing customers, it's helpful to understand kind of that process and how things came to be. And I think to me, it helps you understand how we intend for you to use the platform. So digging a little bit more into the tech, right? There's a lot to it, and you talk about AI, and we have our critical path engine, which is the heart of the system. So when you've got the RPAX score in Moovila, which stands for Robotic Project Assessment Index, which I triple checked and wrote down, what came first, the chicken or the egg, the critical path or the RPAX score?
So the critical path engine for sure came first, and it is sort of the brain behind all of it, right? It's kind of the differentiator in the platform. And I guess even stepping back further than that, one of the things, and we don't talk about this a lot when we're sort of in a selling or a marketing motion on this, but part of what we looked at is said, hey, work should be the digital transformation that needs to occur for efficiencies around this is work needs to be thought about like a programming language. And this was part of why we got into this partnership too with Komatsu and that, because they saw that. And we said, look, there are really big inefficiencies when human beings simply think about work like it's management. And if we can think about it like it's a programming language, how we structured work and manage that, we can start to get a lot of the benefits of a work programming language, right? And enforce that with integrity. And then that means that we can debug it, compile it, track it, automate it. And this makes a lot more sense now than when we were saying it 3 or 4 years ago, is that you can begin handing and managing the handoffs between human and automation, human and AI process, and having a framework, a work programming framework around that that's customizable can allow you to do that, right? So once again, I hate to kind of keep bringing up the construction side of things, but they had
Yeah,
autonomous bulldozers and excavators. We were doing a lot of automated things, and there had to be handoff between automation and human. And so the framework allows for that. And we see a big opportunity in the MSP space for that as well. But that we had to build that engine, right? The critical path engine, the programming engine, the quote unquote compiler had to manage all that. Getting to the RPAX score, the thing that ultimately came out of that, and that was sort of a throwback from, remember before I said we sold the prior business to Equifax, one of the 3 credit agencies, and everyone's familiar with what a credit score is, right? Credit score is this univariate value that everybody has, and the credit agencies provide that to banks and other lenders because it is a really simple, high-level objective. What's the credit risk or the credit worthiness of this person? And so the banks don't have time to go and see if you've paid your bills and what your mortgage is and how many credit cards you have. So they wanted this credit score to go in a blink. Is it good or is it bad? You're kind of giving me the idea about the health of it. So we said, look, there are a lot of executives that are looking at their projects and their portfolio, and they don't have the time to dig into every one of those. They might have 50, they might have 100. Couldn't we take this same concept of a credit score for the project and get a couple of dozen objective measures and create this score so you could look at it, and if the score was high, you would know good structured project, it's on time, we don't have resource problems. If the score is low or it's going low, what's the problem? Hey, the problem is we know that we have a resource issue, it's a poorly structured project, but the executive doesn't need to know, right? They just go, hey, explain to me why this is a problem. Now, the critical path engine will then tell them, here are the reasons why. Like, we don't get to know. If your credit score is low, you can get hints. And in some of the agencies, if you pay for their extra services, will tell you, oh, maybe you have too many credit cards or you have this or that or other. But we're really clear to say, these are the reasons why the score is down. And then we have Carmen, the AI agent, that will guide you through remediation and follow best practice to get that score back up immediately if they need to. But once again, identify those risks. So the idea for the RPAX score was this, hey, what do I need to look at? Maybe there's a low score in a project that I don't really care about because it's internal and it's not critical. So what? But I know we might have a customer that's at risk. And if I see a low score, I want to know about that as a leader immediately. Once again, I don't have time to dig into it, but I can go to the onboarding manager, the project manager, go, what's going on here? Why does Acme Core have a low score? Oh, it's because there's a critical path delay because they didn't get something back to us. Okay, let's communicate that, move on to the next project. So the RPAX score is designed to be this high-level objective, call it a health score, or like a credit score for that project, so you can understand, are we good? Is it a solid structured plan? And are we on time? Do we have resource problems? Like, I want to know, can I feel good about these dates, right? Because that's another problem. I think, when you look at project plans, and one of the things we learned when we first rolled this out is 99% of project plans are structurally flawed. They're buggy, call them buggy code, right? And no one wants to operate off of buggy code. You can't trust those dates, and it's not the PM's fault. It's not the PM's fault. That would be like telling a programmer, we're not going to give you a debugger, roll out code, and we'll just trust it. We'll just trust it. And there's not a programmer in the world that would tell you, hey, I can roll out code to production without a debugger. It isn't ever going to happen. They're not going to be able to do it because law of big numbers says they're going to make mistakes. And project managers, program managers, like that happens. They just can't keep up with all the calendar math, the process, the dependencies that, we talk about that change, the probability of change. So having that RPAX number is just a quick handle for people. And the other benefit too, we realized is, hey, that's got to run server side as well as the client. So if someone's not paying attention to this project, that score is going to go down and you're going to know it's been neglected. That was one of the big things that we heard is people were frustrated going, hey, like, I didn't know we were neglecting this. Like, well, you want alarm bells to go off if something's been neglected, quote unquote, something's not been backed up. You get alarm bells. Oh, this server didn't get backed up. Like, you want those alerts. You also want alerts to go, hey, we've been ignoring this project. We haven't updated it. What's going on? Okay, let's step in and understand. Because once again, if that's the project that goes sideways, maybe that's the one the customer calls and goes, hey, if you're missing this, what else are you missing? Like, that's concerning to me that you aren't tracking this. That's worrisome to me. So what else might you be missing? And you don't want to have that inferential, like, oh, we're sloppy or we're not tracking things.
Yeah. And it goes hand in hand with what you said earlier about, everything that goes into a portfolio and project management tool, right? And it's all of those things that go into building it out, or all of those things those project managers have to keep an eye on and manage those risks for. And you make a good point in there too. And I'd just be curious to hear a little bit more. You talked about, executives looking at it from a portfolio level to know that's the project I need to pay attention to, but then also those project managers using it. So was it built, right? And surely we can talk about how we're seeing it used, but was it built with the mindset of like, executives use it this way, project managers use it this way, maybe somebody in the middle, managers use it, directors use it a different way?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely different use cases for different folks. So the reality is, I don't think there are many project managers out there that go, I've got a manageable workload. It feels pretty good. I don't feel like, so they're having to triage what they need to focus on, because at the end of the day, for that score to go up, which means, hey, I've identified the risks. I know where our capacity conflicts are. I've got to pick up the phone or send emails or call people. Like, they're the problem solvers, but they don't have unlimited time. And if they have to go dig into every single project to figure out if there's a bomb about to go off, they're going to burn through a lot of time. So the RPAX score for a PM or a project coordinator allows them to triage and go, I know that's important. That looks good. I can move on to this. That score's low. I got to dig into that. And now I got to focus and understand what that problem is. And once again, the critical path engine in RPAX will surface what those risks are. Hey, you have a blocked task. You have a capacity conflict, meaning you're asking the engineer to be in two places at the same time across the portfolio. You've got a critical path delay. The customer hasn't responded. So tracking all those things and triaging so the PM can focus on the qualitative execution work as opposed to doing mindless updates and mindless calendar math and checking people. Like, I've not met many PMs who go, oh, I love looking at people's, digging into their calendars and making phone calls about that stuff or tracking it. All that should be automated so they can focus on the qualitative components of architecting and engineering success in those projects, right? So understanding that. The other thing too, when you talk about audiences, because there's something called a critical path view, which is this dynamic critical path that gets built, it kind of illuminates where the problem is and really increases transparency to say, this is the delay in the problem. And nobody likes to be the delay in problem, right? And that's hidden to a lot of us. If I know I'm the critical path delay, I'm going to prioritize that task and that work if it's critical to it. I got to know that, right? So for a contributor, for them to understand, hey, you personally are responsible for delaying this project. You're on the critical path. You're the delay. That's very different from them. They've got 4 things or 5 things they could be doing that day. Let's surface and let them know you got to do this first. This is a critical project. It's creating delay. We got to shorten the cycle. Or we have an inevitable delay. You're the next task. Can you get that done in 3 days instead of 6 days? Because we're late and we've got to shorten this. So, once again, it's very different from executive to manager, coordinator, or contributor. It's, what piece of information is relevant and important to them so they can contribute to the organization in the best possible way.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, triaging all of those little things for the PM to be able to run through a list and know this is what I need to do to fix the score so that when I present this out at the top level, right, it's easy for them to understand. So let's go into AI and automation, right? So looking at this problem and thinking it's not worth people's time to have to manually do this. So how did you start incorporating the automation and looking at AI when it came to risks and risk management and the RPAX score for project managers and projects in general?
Yeah. So AI was built, so it's also important to sort of step back. A lot of people have different definitions.
Yep.
AI is a very large definition and ecosystem. And AI combines a lot of different technologies. And within the umbrella of AI, you have deterministic and probabilistic. You have learning systems, you have machine learning systems, and within that, you can even have LLMs, right, which is everybody knows, ChatGPT and those other platforms and tools. And once again, there are differences between deterministic systems and probabilistic systems. And if you have a self-driving car, it has both. It has deterministic and probabilistic. Deterministic is, hey, when you see a red light, like deterministic systems always give you the same answer for the same input every time. It's reliable, it's very domain specific, it's very structured, very trustable, it's interpretable, it's white box, right? There are certain probabilistic AI solutions that cover more generic, broader cases, but they are probabilistic and they won't always give you the same answer for the same question, even against the same data set. So that can be risky, especially when you're talking about something like delivery dates, projects, and process. It's okay if you're telling a generative system to write you a poem. There can be variation and it gives you a same prompt, it gives you a different poem the second time, because once again, it's probabilistic and it's got something called a temperature that will allow it to do variability against that stuff. But we built deterministic AI from the very beginning. It was domain specific. We knew we were living in the world of projects, tasks, due dates, resources, people. And so we were able to build a deterministic model using symbolic AI heuristics and process. So you could evaluate it and it was deterministic in nature. So when you said, is this project going to be late? Do I have risks in these projects? What are those risks? That you always got the same answer and that you could interpret that answer. And that was critical in that process because, and once again, we had the luxury of being domain specific around this. So we knew we didn't have an unlimited set of questions. People weren't going to ask us what's the best recipe for an apple pie like you might do in ChatGPT. They're going to go, is this project on time? What are the risks? What are the problems? Do we have the resources necessary for this? What's the best time to schedule this person on a task? These are all limited in scope. And so by using deterministic, it's faster, more accurate, and more reliable, right? So now the other big issue too is, and once again, make no mistake, the generative AI and the probabilistic AI is very good and we're using those techs too, but it's also really important to differentiate. Some people are like, hey, can't we just dump our project up into one of these LLMs and manage it?
Yeah.
And you know, unfortunately, the answer is no. And there's some technical reasons why no on this, right? So the large language models, ChatGPT, Gemini, all of the major providers, Anthropic, all the major providers and process of these tools have really elevated these technologies in an amazing way over the last several years, right? After the papers came out in, I think it was 2017, 2018, about the transformers, like it wasn't overnight that these tools worked. Like we were aware of it. And people will say like, well, when did they became great overnight? They didn't become great overnight. The error rate, there was just a point when they put a release out that the error rate in their probable response was enough that human beings, our threshold went, oh, that sounded like a real answer to me. It got a lot of these questions. That's impressive. And so it crossed that threshold for language responses, right? Because these generative systems are probability machines. They just say, what's the probability of the next word based on the corpus of data that it had been trained on. So those error rates went down, 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 down around things like language and language prompts and being able to respond to that and the data they were trained on. The error rate also dropped for things like images, 2D and 3D images. Like, it's a lot of fun to go in there and ask it to generate images and process around that. However, there is one area that these tools sort of suck at, and they still suck at, and that is something called graph data. So a graph is a representation of vertices and edges. I'm going to geek out here a little bit around discrete math, but a project is a graph. This project is dependent on this task, is dependent on this task, which is dependent on this one, and these two, and these three. And those tasks are the vertices, and the edges between them are the dependencies. This task is dependent on this, and this task takes this long, and it's a finish to finish. And so those connections between those tasks, those edges and the vertices, that's a graph, right? Whether you're building a house, whether you're onboarding a customer, whether you're setting up a firewall. And unfortunately, these LLMs, they get lost. They can look at their nearest neighbor, but they cannot traverse the whole graph. And the idea was in the beginning, like, oh, it's going to get better at that, just like it got better at everything else. It just hasn't. The error rate is still really, really bad around this. And while the error rate has dropped with language and dropped with images, and we're all amazed and impressed, it's garbage on graph data. And understandably, like, I don't want to go too much into the details of why there's not a lot of hope that tech is going to fix the graph problem, because people are going, oh, there's graph tools that you can pull the data. Yeah, you can absorb the data, you can generate a graph, but to monitor and manage it, it just gets lost. It can't traverse the whole project. And that becomes an issue, right? So you can't just dump a project plan into an LLM and go, tell me what the problems are and the risks and the issues and where it will hallucinate. And when it hallucinates and gets it wrong, that can be a really big challenge. So we, like I said, we have a deterministic model that will analyze all those segments and nodes, and we do traverse the graph and we evaluate each of those points kind of in a deterministic way around this. And like I said, you don't have to take my word that this is a problem. Obviously, everybody knows that Microsoft is, with OpenAI has that tool and that tech. And as well, Amazon has tools as well. So Harvard and Amazon put a study out this spring, as well as Michigan State and Microsoft, I think, those institutions and organizations could have been flipped, but both came out showing the statistics going, hey, it's still a problem. It's still a problem. And the learning process that they're doing, the reasoning models are also not showing a performance and improvement. So like I said, maybe more than everyone wanted to know about that, but there is this challenge of it's good on atomic tasks. It's good in isolation, but in a large structured project, its ability to traverse up and down all those nodes accurately, it just kind of can't do it. It kind of gets lost.
No, and I find it helpful to have that background and have that understanding to know that, hey, in Moovila, that RPAX score is going across all of those different points, right? And all of those risks that go into that project, there's all of those points and those specific call outs that RPAX score will track. And I think for me, coming into this space and the MSP space from, large scale manufacturing projects and whatnot, a lot of what I used to use the risk register for, or my risk register for, was things like capacity conflict and, invalid dates and timeline delays. And now, right, in Moovila, the use of the risk register, I think, changes drastically. It because the PMs are able to use the RPAX score for that triage and working through all of those risks, it then opens up the risk register to be used completely differently.
Yeah. It becomes much more of qualitative, subjective items that they might, hey, this person's mother might be getting hip surgery that could create we don't, that's obviously not an objective measure that you're going to be able to track in that. However, if the mother's hip surgery is put on that person's calendar and they're unavailable, that will blow up and show in the RPAX score and go, hey, they're not available. This is going to create a delay, right? So the devil's in the details on a lot of this stuff. When you think about a project with a customer and the dependencies, once again, if you're onboarding that customer, there are dependencies. They have to deliver on their tasks to go through sequence and process. If you're going through a deployment of technology, you're ordering that tech provisioning process, these dependencies exist, and the delays can cascade down. And the sooner you're aware of those problems and those issues in that churn, because once again, as we talked about statistically, it's inevitable. If I would say there's one thing I would say is probabilistically, it's inevitable that you are going to have problems and challenges, full stop. So what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do? Find out early, try to avoid spending your time on minutia BS work and calendar math, and focus on sort of problem solving, not chasing your tail with details. Yeah.
And, in the MSP space, if we look at the RPAX score and the issues that are called out the most often, right? It's usually don't have any durations on your tasks. You don't have any dependencies on your tasks. A little bit around work estimates. Some people struggle with, I just have a big bucket of hours and I'm going to claw down from that as the project goes on, instead of saying, hey, here's the breakdown of my hours on all those tasks, and it rolls up to that bucket. So, again, durations, dependencies, and then of course invalid dates right? Seeing that a lot. I see a lot of illogical status too, right? Where when people are getting in there and they're finally able to start to think this way and let the automation run that for them, saying, oh, well, this happens this day and these can actually happen at the same time. And the first time you run through that project plan and you see like, oh, well, how did the engineer complete, these 6 tasks when I thought I had to have this one thing done? It allows people to take a step back and look at how should our plans be structured. From your history and point of view, Mike, for starting from the construction space and then seeing what we're seeing in the MSP space with the most common issues and risks in that RPAX score, is that consistent for you across all projects, or do you see other issues called out more frequently?
Well, I guess, obviously I'm talking about a lot of details, but I guess distilling the whole thing down at the end of the day, it's bad dates. Like at the end of the day, now we have dozens of things that we do in the RPAX score and track and manage all those, but the symptom, the thing that screws people over are bad dates. And those bad dates contaminate your entire business intelligence pipeline. It screws up stakeholder communication. It impairs your credibility, your readiness. You have scheduling churn with your engineers because you thought it was going to be on this date, but it wasn't, and they weren't available, and they're either not working when they could have been billable, or they lose capacity, or they got to switch on that day doing something they didn't think they'd have to do. And that's called context switching, right? And that's stressful for the engineer. It's easy for computers, but it's hard on a person to go, you were supposed to do this, now you're not going to. That's all because of bad dates, right? So when we look at this, at the end of the day, what screws people over is bad dates. Hey, I told my customer we were going to deliver this February 16th. That was a bad date, actually. It's not now going to be until April 10th. I gave them a bad date. Or, hey, I thought this engineer was going to be on site on the 11th. Hey, it was a bad date. It's in there as a bad date. They're not going to be in there. You don't know this. They're going to show up on the 11th and they weren't ready for it, or they're going to find out from the scheduler on the 10th or the 11th this can't work, and now you're going to scramble. So, I always sort of step back and people go, what's the problem is bad dates. And it just creates so much chaos for efficiency, scheduling, margins, and the system by and large, when you think about resource management, you think about capacity, project management process, it's about getting accurate on those dates. So the scheduling is efficient, the customer's expectations are met, your margins can be improved, efficiency is tracked. Like all of that becomes so much better with accurate dates. And especially in the MSP community, when you talk about, one of the challenges, and it was the same in the construction, it was like bad dates become a problem. And it isn't just like, when is this task going to be delivered? It's, okay, how long did it actually take to get done? Are we over on this? Because in time tracking, you're like, well, wait a minute, we thought this was going to take X number of hours and be done in 2 days, but it took 5 days. So we were wrong on the duration. Do you ever go back and check that? Or are you going to make that same mistake again in the next project? Because, well, I don't know, it's really hard to gather that data. Okay, well, you're losing money and time on those 6 tasks every single time. Do you know that? We have something called template analytics that will gather that data and let you know, hey, you estimate this for 4 hours, but it really is looking like it's 8 hours, not 4 hours. Okay, next time let's bid it at 8 hours or spend. So once again, it's bad, I'd say more than just estimates, bad time. Bad time becomes the contaminating problem across it. And that's sort of the thing that we go, we can fix that and make that a lot better. We're going to improve margins, improve people's stress level, their sanity, and work effort.
Yeah. And the way to get to those dates, you need a well-structured plan, right? And it's really helpful for that RPAX score to say, hey, even on your, especially on your templates, saying, okay, I've got everything I need. I have a good RPAX score on my template so that I know when that template is then used on a project, I've got a good starting point, right? I know that I've got a good structure. I know that I can forecast those dates and I can identify those delays as they pop up.
Yeah. And look, project management is not a sexy concept, right? But if you ignore it, you ignore it at your peril, right? And it's like most things, right? You ignore those things, you suffer for it. Our goal was to try to automate a lot of the mundane, nasty things so you could focus on and enjoy your life and your mindset a little more and avoid the unpleasant surprises of, once again, bad dates.
Sure. Yeah. And circling back a little bit too to how personal experience and also what we see as well on those, how the risk register is then used. To your point, you're able to call out things ahead of time of saying, hey, so-and-so might be out over this period of time. What would that then do to impact our project? I see a lot of, PMs go in and they review that scope of work and they review the plan that the engineers built out and said, I think it'll take me this long to do it. I see a lot of people calling out under scoped work in their risk register, right? Saying, hey, I think we don't have enough hours on this. We're ultimately going to go over. So there some more broad buckets, right? To say budget, is the customer going to be upset about this, whatnot, and then allowing you to then take those larger buckets. And then at the portfolio level, you can look at, here's all of our financial or underscoped risks that we have out there compared to that RPAX score that is going to give you the information around those timelines. And you can compare, timelines and the risks, and you can compare customer satisfactions with those risks, and you can see that direct correlation between all of those.
Yeah.
So where do you see it going, Mike? Where do you see the risk management and projects and the automation around that risk going?
So we're really excited. Obviously, the AI revolution has been really helpful for us, because previously when we'd said, hey, you shouldn't manage work, you should program it. This is going to allow automation to sit alongside humans. This is going to improve efficiency. It's about working with humans, not replacing them. It's about improving it. Prior to this, that was a tougher conversation with people who are like, I don't get it. It doesn't matter. I think that's a lot more relevant to people to understand. And so for us, as we think about this, we know that the ability to hang agents off of that framework and structure is going to lead to more efficient execution process and trust in structured work. The other thing that I'll say, and this is sort of kind of the truth of the situation, and we'll come back to those studies about what, everyone's afraid of AI is going to be a problem, a challenge, is going to replace everybody's job. And that's not necessarily true. And there isn't line of sight around that. But the thing that we know more so, and that we do have line of sight, is to say, yes, AI is going to be able to replace atomic level tasks, right? It's going to be able to solve singular instances of issues, and the machines and the equipment are going to self-heal, track, and manage, because that's an atomic level issue. However, larger scaled structured work process, i.e. projects, we know they're not going to be able to manage those anytime soon. And so when you think about MSPs and MSSPs, the work that they're doing that's going to be needed to be done and continue to be tracked, managed with humans alongside automations, it is going to be around that more structured work. So we're excited to support that transition, right? And the industry will evolve. It's going to continue to evolve. There's going to continue, and AI isn't going to replace that. Like, there's no penalty for these CEOs and their hype cycles of saying it'll do everything, it'll do everything, it'll do everything. But they're even sponsoring and putting out research going, well, maybe not this, maybe not this. And like I said, the good news for the MSPs is one of the not this is the relationship building projects that you're going to deliver with those customers, the things that are multiple steps, and there are relationships and teams working on those things together. There's still going to be a need for those. Those are going to be really important. And as MSPs evolve into that space, we're excited to deliver the technologies to enable that, make that efficient, and give their customers the best experience and the best relationship.
Yeah, and you make a good point there too, right? About every leadership saying we're going to automate everything. How do you see the culture around allowing AI to automate the risk management and the project management, right? And I know that's a very broad question that could go a number of different ways, but how do you get people to adopt it, right? How do you get teams to say, yeah, I'm going to use the RPAX score. This thing is not lying to me. It to your point, it's white box. I can understand why it's calling this out, and I can understand the math. How do you get your team, around adopting that?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with what you said. It is a deterministic, interpretable white box answer. It's not hallucinating, right? So you're not getting those different answers. And I think sometimes you have to tell people that, like, hey, this isn't a probabilistic, like, it's not hallucinating. When it says the 17th, it's saying the 17th for these discrete, understandable reasons. And the AI agent that tells you to remediate it has to go through a deterministic process to say, you need to remediate in this order for these reasons because you have these problems. And that has to adapt to that. But it's going to give a deterministic, reliable response and answer to that. They're not going to go, why this time and why the, and that's what erodes trust, right? When as someone in our office said, oh, I asked, where there was a yoga studio nearby, and it literally made the name of a yoga studio up and the address, like didn't exist. That can undermine one's confidence about the technology. So having deterministic focused systems, you build that trust because you go, oh, I get it. I see the answer. Why that answer is there. I can unpack, resolve it. And I've done that now, half a dozen, double it. It seems understandable, reliable. Okay, that makes sense. And that's, when you say, where is it going? We have the ability. Yeah. We could autonomously update and track the manage and do the risks. But overwhelmingly, PMs have said, I want to supervise that automation. Like, I want you to do the nasty work for me and tell me what those issues are. And then I want to be able to pull the trigger on the final changes quickly. I don't want this just done in the background. And that's understandable. It's like a self-driving car, right? We want to trust that the emergency brakes work, the cruise control, the lane assist. We're chipping our way towards a self-driving car and some of that stuff, but we're not just going to get in the back seat of a car and trust that it's going to take us, from our doorstep to our in-laws on highways and not worry about it, right? So there is this idea of supervised automation. It can be super helpful, keep us safer, faster, and more efficient, but we want to be able to supervise that and pull the triggers in a reliable way.
Yeah, and I know we're coming towards the end here. So any questions y'all have, right? Drop them in the chat, drop them in the questions. We've got our eyes on that throughout. Colleen, I'm just looking at that. Oh, you were the one that asked for the yoga studio, and it made it up on you. And for, I know we've got some existing customers on here, and you probably heard me say this on calls. I'll sit there and I'll argue with the RPAX score, or I will argue with the critical path engine, be like, no, this doesn't make any sense. Why is it doing that? And every time you sit there and you unpack it and you go through, you're like, oh, it's right. It's right. It's a lot smarter than I am, right? So I think it's
not necessarily smarter. It's just the problem is it's not possible for a human being to do all of that calendar math in a blink across a portfolio instantly, every single time, every change, every person, all their calendars, all their schedules. It just can't be done.
Yeah.
And why would you want to do it?
No. And like I said, right, it calls those risks out there for you. So, for anybody listening in, of course, whether you're using Moovila, you're not using Moovila, you're managing projects, you need to track those risks around timelines, budgets, capacity constraints. Do I have a well-structured plan so that I can understand where that timeline is going? These are all, all important things that you need to track.
Yeah.
Colleen, you can come back too. You didn't have to.
Well, and I would say the one other thing, Lewis, too, that we had talked about as well is like, what is the unlock for MSPs to unlock automation, right? What is the one thing that maybe they're not doing today that they have to do? And that's define a dependency. Like, I don't know how much you see that with organizations as they come through. If you're unwilling to say this is dependent on that, then you're kind of foregoing a lot of automation. You're foregoing the ability to detect problems and risks. You don't want to say duration too, but some organizations, for whatever reason, and I think you've seen this, Lewis, right? They just kind of don't want to define dependencies. And that's up to you. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, but you forego a mountain of automation, risk detection, and problems if you're unwilling to do that, right? That's the price of admission, is to say, hey, we're willing as an organization to say this depends on this. And if you're willing to do that, you unlock a lot of automation. If you're unwilling to do that, then you're going to just get bad dates. Like, there's no way around it. Unless you have a teeny tiny number of projects.
Sure. I would argue durations are required as well,
yes.
too. Yeah, and you got to start with dependencies, but durations, that's when you see projects just dragging out forever, right?
Do you see more people struggle with, like, the ones that do struggle? Do you see them struggle with durations more than dependencies, or vice versa? Which one of those? I know we talk about D&D durations and dependencies, but I don't know. That's
a tough one. I would say honestly, it might be durations, right?
Okay.
I mean, people
How long the
understand.
thing's going to take? Hey, we got to install this. It's going to take us 2 hours. The duration, 2 hours is the work estimate, which people budget today. They know that, but
Yep.
hey, we'll give you 5 days to do this 2-hour task.
Yep. Yep. People typically know I need to get the hardware before I can configure the hardware, before I can go on site and install it, right? So we find that building those out seems to be easier, right? But the durations of, well, how long? Well, it's only going to take you an hour, but how long is it going to take? And they're like, oh, well, we might have to get this from this person and that from that person. So, durations are a very big risk that.
But it's okay to guess that. I mean, I guess that's
Yeah.
the issue is they can guess that initially, and then it can get revised once they pull analytics off it to go, hey, you were wrong. You said 5 days. It's actually 8 days based on your data, or it's only 3 days. Oh, okay. Like maybe just the confidence to know, hey, a guess is okay. It's better than nothing. But once again, then your data trains actual experience. And that's why I was saying dependency. Like dependency, they got to define that. They can be a little bit wrong on the initial durations, and the system will then tell them this was your duration. But the system isn't going to always be able to define those dependencies.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just pick something, go with it. Right. Go, Colleen, jump in.
So you said, Lewis, that sometimes MSPs will see their RPAX scores saying one thing, or they might have a red score, and they're like, oh, that can't be right. What's typically causing that when you see that it does end up being right?
Yeah, great question. So it's going to sound really, really simple, and not everybody. I see some people on this call that they do this. So I'll give them credit for that. You know who you are, who's on here. But a lot of people will be like, I worked through all my different items and whatnot, and then they'll still have a bad score. And I'll be like, well, your due date on your project, you're forecasted 2 months after your due date of your project. And in the MSP space, so many people but they just don't give customers when this project's going to be done or the due date on it, which still to this day absolutely blows my mind, because if I'm a customer, I want to know what's it cost and when are you going to finish it, right? And so many people are not used to updating due dates on their projects that they'll be forecasted past their due date, and then they still have a bad score. And I say, well, you're going to be late on your project, right? And the RPAX score is smart enough to know that, hey, based on the duration left to that due date, whether it's 1 week or 1 month, that impacts your score, right? You only have so much time you can try to pick that up. So using forecasted dates to keep your due date in line. And now, whole other conversation of, do I update that due date? That's dependent on, is it an internal reason why we're late? Like we just didn't do it on time? Then I might keep that forecasted late and I want to show that. But if the customer is the reason I didn't get the credentials, which is, we know the majority of the time, right? Then I'm pushing that date out, right? Hey, y'all didn't get us the credentials. We can't get this in time. We're going to push that date out. And then our RPAX score will jump way up.
Love it.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions? I mean, it can be anything risk management related. These two,
Yeah. One other, while we see if any of those pop in, just one other tip or trick or whatever it might be is, in your templates, we're talking about using the templates and refining your durations and work estimates and whatnot. Set your risks in there too, right? Knowing that whether you use Moovila, you don't use Moovila, if you're typically always over on your timeline, set that risk in your template so that when that template's used for a project, oh, yep, this thing, we're always over on that thing. Take those risks, learn those in your project reviews, drop them into your templates so that you can try to get as far out ahead of them as possible.
That's a really good tip.
I appreciate you taking the time on a Friday to learn a little about risk management and how Moovila might potentially help you in that journey. Anything else, Lewis, you got? Colleen?
That's it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.